On Father's Day, my daughter sent me a gift box that was supposed to be a surprise. But my wife Elena took one look at it and whispered, "Don't open it." I asked why. "Can't you see?" I looked closer and froze in shock. 10 minutes later, the police arrived. You won't believe what was in that box. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. Dad, do you even understand that I need the money now, not after you die? Chloe's words, flung at me like daggers, still echoed in my ears, though a week had passed since that fateful confrontation. It wasn't a request, it was a demand, an ultimatum. We were in our living room, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun, a room filled with tangible memories of happier times. The porcelain tea set my wife, Elena, and I had bought at an antique shop during our honeymoon in New England. The Persian rug, a gift from my parents on our 10th anniversary. And here, in the heart of our sanctuary, my only daughter, flesh of my flesh, stared at me with icy contempt. Beside her, sprawled on our leather sofa, sat Leo, her so-called business partner and boyfriend. His smirk was so smug, I felt an urge to wipe it from his face. He was the epitome of everything I despised: lazy, unmotivated, living off others, and filling my daughter's head with poisonous notions that the world owed her something. "Chloe, we've been over this," I began, trying to maintain my composure. "Your idea to launch an artisanal wellness brand is just another fantasy. You have no business plan, no experience, not even a clear understanding of what you intend to sell." My words were swallowed by her indignant sigh. "It's not a fantasy. It's my chance. My chance to be independent, successful. But I need capital to start. $50,000. For you, it's pocket change, a drop in your retirement fund." I clenched my fists, feeling the familiar heat of anger rising within me. A drop in the bucket. She had no idea what that bucket had cost me. 40 years as a civil engineer. 40 years of early mornings, late nights, missed family dinners, and canceled vacations. I built bridges and skyscrapers, pouring not just my knowledge, but my health into every project. I did it for the future. For Elena to have a comfortable old age, and for Chloe to have a carefree childhood and the best start in life I could provide. And now she called the fruits of my labor a drop in the bucket. "Come on, Mr. Morgan," Leo interjected, his voice oily and unpleasant. "Chloe is your only daughter. Don't you want to see her happy and successful? Imagine the opportunities it would open up. You could be proud of her." Proud. I looked at him, at his designer t-shirt with a ridiculous print and his overly expensive sneakers, which I was sure Chloe had bought with the money I'd given her for groceries. I was proud of my daughter when she graduated high school with honors. I was proud when she got into the university I paid for. But for the last few years, since Leo entered her life, there had been fewer and fewer reasons to be proud. She dropped out of college, cycled through several dead-end jobs, and immersed herself in the world of social media, dreaming of fame and easy money. Every month started with her call and another unforeseen situation. The car broke down, rent was due immediately, there were urgent medical expenses. And I paid. I paid because she was my daughter. I paid because Elena begged me to help, believing Chloe would get her act together any day now. But this day was a turning point. $50,000 was no longer a simple request for help. It was a brazen attempt to dip into my pocket, my future, our peace of mind. "My answer is no," I said firmly, looking directly into Chloe's eyes. "No $50,000. If you want to be a businesswoman, find investors, get a bank loan, prove your idea is viable. My retirement savings are not your seed capital." Chloe's face contorted with rage. She sprang to her feet, knocking over her half-finished coffee cup. The dark liquid spread across the light-colored rug, leaving an ugly stain. "I knew it," she screamed, her voice cracking. "You've always been like this. Greedy, selfish. You hoard your money like a dragon while your own daughter wallows in poverty." Poverty. I surveyed her latest iPhone on the table, her manicure, which likely cost more than my weekly grocery budget, her designer handbag. Her poverty looked remarkably comfortable and expensive. "You created your poverty yourself," I said quietly, each word laced with cold fury. "Through your choices. Your refusal to work. Your belief that everyone owes you something." Elena entered the room, drawn by the noise. Her face was pale. "Adam, Chloe, please, let's not." But it was too late. Chloe turned to her mother. "And you, Mom? Are you going to keep defending him?" This miser who prefers money to his own family. Accusations rained down on me like blows. Greedy. Miser. Selfish. Me, who had given her everything I could, and more. Get out. I breathed, feeling my knees tremble with tension. Both of you. Get out of my house. They froze, surprised. I always caved before. After the shouting and tears, there was always my sigh and another bank transfer. Not today. I walked to the front door and flung it open. Leave. And don't come back until you learn to respect me and my work. Chloe grabbed her purse. You'll regret this, she hissed. When you're old and sick and alone, remember this day. Remember how you traded your daughter for your dirty pieces of paper. Leo, passing me, spat. This isn't over, old man. The door slammed shut with such force that the windows rattled. I stood in the deafening silence, staring at the coffee stain on the rug, a symbol of our shattered family. After Chloe and Leo slammed the door, the house plunged into a ringing silence that was louder than their shouting. Elena wordlessly picked up a rag and began scrubbing the coffee stain, her movements mechanical, detached. I remained by the door, watching the receding red taillights of their car. My chest felt hollow. Not anger, not resentment, but a vast, scorched emptiness, as if something vital that had lived within me for years had finally died. The belief that my daughter, despite all her mistakes, loved me. The belief that our family, despite the cracks, was still a family. Adam. Elena called softly, not looking up from the rug. I turned slowly. The living room, an hour earlier a haven, now looked like a battlefield. Displaced cushions, an overturned cup, the dark stain on the rug, all physical manifestations of the devastation that had settled in our relationship. 40 years, Len, I whispered, my voice sounding foreign. 40 years I worked, only for her to call me a greedy miser. I walked to the fireplace and picked up our favorite family photo. 5-year-old Chloe sat on my shoulders, her face radiant with happiness, her toothless smile aimed at the camera. We were at the county fair. I remembered the smell of cotton candy, the loud music, and the feel of her small hands gripping my hair. Where had that little girl gone? At what point did she transform into this cynical, calculating woman who measured a father's love in dollars? She didn't mean it, Elena said, but her voice lacked conviction. She's just upset. Leo is poisoning her mind, filling her with these terrible ideas. I chuckled bitterly. Leo? Yes, he's adding fuel to the fire. But he didn't start the blaze. He just gave voice to the greed and selfishness that were already inside her. And we, Len, we nurtured it all these years. We moved to the kitchen, and Elena put the kettle on. This ritual, sharing tea after a difficult day, always used to calm us. But today, it brought no relief. We sat in silence, and memories flashed before my eyes. Me selling my cherished vinyl collection to pay for her college tutors. Elena and I taking out a second mortgage on the house to fund the wedding she dreamed of, a wedding that ended in divorce a year later, leaving us with enormous debt. Me transferring money to her again and again, covering her unforeseen expenses, which were actually lavish outings, designer clothes, and parties with Leo. Each time, I told myself it was the last time. Each time, Elena convinced me we had to help, because she was our daughter. We weren't helping. We were crippling her, denying her the chance to grow up, take responsibility, learn to live within her means. We created a monster that was now demanding our own future as a sacrifice. My phone vibrated. A text from Chloe. I expected an apology, or at least an attempt at reconciliation. But what I saw on the screen chilled me to the bone. Hope you're happy. Your grandkids need winter coats and school supplies, but apparently your precious money is more important. Don't expect to see them anytime soon. Michael and Sophie, 8 and 6, my adored grandchildren. She knew exactly where to strike. The cruelest, lowest blow. Using children as a tool for blackmail. I silently handed the phone to Elena. She read the message, and her face crumpled. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She wouldn't really do that, would she? She whispered. She couldn't possibly keep us from seeing the grandchildren. But we both knew the answer. She would. She'd done it before, during minor arguments, when we refused to immediately comply with her latest financial demands. A week without the grandchildren, 2 weeks. It was her standard tactic, her trump card. Adam, maybe we should. She began, but I cut her off. No, my voice was like steel. Not this time. It stops here. I won't let her blackmail us with the children. I won't let her turn our relationship with our grandchildren into a commodity that can be bought or sold. I will no longer pay for her love or her right to be called grandma. Elena's eyes were filled with terror. In nearly 40 years of marriage, she had rarely seen me this way. Not just angry, but cold and resolute. That night, something broke not just in Chloe, but in me. The illusion of a loving family built on sacrifice and compromise shattered into a million pieces, like that coffee cup. And I realized the only way to rebuild my life was to stop picking up the pieces of her destruction. I had to let her go. For my sake. For Elena's. And, paradoxically, for Chloe herself, who perhaps only a complete fall could motivate to push off and start climbing again. The silence in the house no longer felt deafening. It was now filled with a new, cold resolve. A week passed. A week of deafening silence. No calls, no messages, no apologies. Chloe, who usually couldn't go 3 days without another plea for help, had vanished from our radar. This silence was unnatural, ominous. It felt like the calm before a storm, and my intuition told me that the storm would be devastating. Today was my 63rd birthday. The morning began peacefully. Elena baked my favorite apple pie, the aroma of cinnamon filling the entire house. We sat on the back porch, sipping coffee and reading the morning paper. The sun warmed us gently, birds sang, and for a moment, I felt like everything was all right, like that terrible conversation had been just a bad dream. I tried to convince myself that Chloe was just offended, that she needed time to cool off and reflect. But deep down, I knew it was self-deception. I knew my daughter. She wasn't one to forgive and forget, especially when it came to money she considered hers by right. Around 10 in the morning, the doorbell rang. I was surprised. We weren't expecting anyone. I opened the door to find a courier from a delivery service holding a large cardboard box. "Adam Morgan?" he asked. I nodded. "Happy birthday, sir," he smiled, handing me the box and a tablet for a signature. "Someone must really like you to pay for express delivery on a Sunday." I signed and took the box. It was surprisingly light for its size, about the dimensions of a shoebox, but slightly larger. The shipping label had no return address, only my name and address printed on a standard label. "Who is it from, honey?" Elena asked, coming out of the kitchen. "No idea," I replied, carrying the box into the living room. No identifying marks. I placed it on the coffee table, the very table Chloe had stained with coffee a week ago. "Maybe from the grandkids?" Elena suggested hopefully. "Michael was so excited to get you a new fishing kit." I shook my head. They would have called. And Chloe wouldn't have splurged on express delivery. Especially not now. Something about this anonymous box set my teeth on edge. Elena, always more suspicious than I, approached and began examining it closely. She had a keen eye for detail, noticing things I missed. She ran her fingers along the edges of the box, the tape, and then her gaze froze. "Adam," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't open it." "Why?" I asked, not understanding. She pointed to the side of the box. "Don't you see? The holes. Little holes. They're for air. That means something alive is inside." I looked closer, and my blood ran cold. Now that she'd pointed them out, I saw them. Several tiny, neatly punched holes, almost invisible against the brown cardboard. My stomach plummeted. Something alive. Who would send us something alive in an anonymous box on my birthday? The question hung in the air, but the answer was beginning to form in my mind, cold and ugly. The timing, the anonymity, the calculated cruelty. This wasn't a gift. It was a message. And suddenly, a faint, barely audible rustling came from inside the box. We both froze. The sound stopped. And then it came again, louder this time, a distinct rustling that sounded like tiny claws scrabbling against cardboard. "Did you hear that?" Elena whispered, her voice barely audible. I nodded, unable to speak. The morning sun streaming through the window suddenly felt cold, and the silence in the house was filled with primal dread. Whatever was in that box was alive, and it was waking up. Our cozy home had instantly become an unsafe place. It had become a trap, with a cardboard box from an unwelcome sender sitting at its center. And I had a terrifying certainty about who had sent it. We stood frozen, a few feet away from the coffee table, unable to tear our eyes from the cardboard box. The sunlight pouring through the window caught dust motes dancing in the air, and time itself seemed to slow. Every beat of my heart echoed in my ears like a drum. The rustling inside the box stopped, and the ensuing silence was even more chilling. I could barely hear Elena breathing next to me, her fingers still gripping my forearm like a lifeline. Then, a new sound emerged from the box. It wasn't rustling, it was a soft, intermittent tapping, as if something small and hard was hitting the cardboard walls. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap. This sound was worse than a scream. It was methodical, deliberate. It spoke of a creature or creatures that hadn't just woken up. They were trying to escape. Adam. Elena's voice was a faint whisper, laced with terror. Call them. Call the police. Now. Her words jolted me out of my stupor. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my phone. My fingers felt clumsy. I dialed the wrong number several times before the familiar digits of 911 appeared on the screen. 911. What is your emergency? A calm female voice answered. Hello, my voice cracked. We've received a package. A suspicious package. There's something alive inside. I spoke quickly, disjointedly, trying to articulate the irrational fear that gripped me. It's anonymous, and there are sounds coming from it. Sir, please calm down. Can you describe the sounds you are hearing? The dispatcher's voice was professionally steady, which helped calm me slightly. I glanced at Elena. She nodded, as if encouraging me to continue. The tapping was replaced by a new, even more intense rustling. Rustling, I said, and it sounds like something is scratching. And tapping. It's trying to get out. I refrained from mentioning my suspicions about the sender. It sounded like the ravings of a madman. Are there any damages, stains, or wires on the box? The dispatcher continued. No, nothing like that. Just small holes. For air. My voice wavered again. Sir, I am dispatching officers to your location immediately. Please move away from the package. Do not touch it or attempt to open it under any circumstances. Do you understand? Yes, I understand. Do we need to leave the house? No, stay inside, but move to another room, away from the living room. Lock the door. Officers will be there within 10 minutes. 10 minutes. In normal circumstances, that would be a blink of an eye. But now, with this Pandora's box sitting in the center of our home, 10 minutes felt like an eternity. We slowly backed out of the living room, our eyes glued to the box, as if fearing it might explode or the lid might suddenly fly open. I led Elena into our bedroom at the far end of the house and firmly closed the door. We sat on the edge of the bed. Who could have done this, Adam? Elena asked, but I saw the same answer in her eyes as I had in my own. Saying Chloe's name aloud meant acknowledging the monstrous truth. Our daughter was capable of such calculated, sophisticated cruelty. Its purpose not just revenge, but terror, intimidation, a desire to break us, to see us frightened and defeated. I remembered her last words. You'll regret this. I thought they were empty threats, hurled in a fit of anger. I was wrong. This was an announcement. An announcement of what happened today. Through the closed door, we heard a dull thud. Something inside the box had apparently gained momentum and struck the wall with greater force. Elena and I flinched. I put my arm around her, feeling her tremble. In that moment, I hated my daughter. I hated her with the all-consuming hatred only a parent whose love has been betrayed in the most cynical way can feel. Exotic Pets World. Anonymous package. Tarantulas. And that laugh. It all fit. The puzzle pieces clicked into place. I think I know who did it, I said, my voice cold as ice. Elena looked at me, her eyes wide with dread. When the specialists left with the container holding a dozen tiny nightmares, and Officer Reeves, after leaving us his card and a stern recommendation to reconsider any potential senders, had also departed, a heavy, viscous silence descended upon the house. The living room looked as it always did, but the air felt tainted. I couldn't bear to look at the coffee table without picturing that box. Elena sank into an armchair, her gaze vacant. The birthday that had begun with the aroma of apple pie and sunlight had devolved into the darkest day of my life. Betrayal wasn't a strong enough word. What Chloe had done went beyond betrayal. It was an act of psychological terrorism, meticulously planned and coldly executed. She didn't just want revenge. She wanted to break us, humiliate us, force us to live in fear. I'm going to call her, I said, my voice sounding hollow and resolute. Elena looked up at me, her eyes wide with fear. Adam, don't. What will you say? She'll deny everything. Let her deny it, I snapped. I need to hear her voice. I need to know. I picked up my phone. My hands were no longer trembling. Anger had supplanted fear, transforming into a cold, ringing fury. I found her contact information. The picture, taken at Sophie's birthday party a year ago, showed Chloe smiling, holding her daughter close. Now, it seemed like a monstrous mask hiding a monster. I pressed the call button. The phone rang for a long time. I thought she wouldn't answer, but on the fifth ring, her voice came through the receiver. Dad? Hi. Why are you calling? Her tone was deliberately casual, even cheerful. That affected tone she always used when she was up to something or trying to hide something. Happy birthday, by the way. I totally got caught up and forgot to call this morning. My fingers tightened on the phone, the plastic creaking. Forgot to wish me a happy birthday. She hadn't forgotten. She was preparing her gift. Thank you, Chloe, I said, trying to keep my voice level. I had a very interesting birthday. Oh yeah. There was an impatient curiosity in her voice. What happened? I paused, choosing my words carefully. I received a package. A very unusual one. In a large box. Do you happen to know anything about it? A silence fell on the other end. Just a couple of seconds, but in that silence, I heard it all. Her confusion, her attempt to quickly formulate a response. A gift? No, Dad, I didn't send you anything. What was in it? Her answer came too quickly, too smoothly. But what I heard next was irrefutable proof, the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. In the background, faintly but unmistakably, I heard a chuckle. A low, suppressed, malicious laugh. It was Leo. I would recognize that disgusting laugh anywhere. He wasn't surprised. He was savoring the moment. He knew. They both knew. They were probably sitting together right now, waiting for my call, anticipating my fear and panic. In that moment, all doubts, all tiny remnants of hope that I might be wrong, evaporated. The picture became crystal clear. Exotic Pets World. Anonymous package. Tarantulas. And that chuckle. The puzzle pieces snapped into place. I see, I said, my voice as cold as ice. Just some delivery mix-up, I suppose. No matter. I won't keep you any longer. Dad, wait, you sound weird. Is everything okay? There was a hint of concern in her voice, but it wasn't genuine care. It was the fear that their plan hadn't gone as expected, that I had figured something out. Everything is perfectly fine, Chloe, I stated flatly. Enjoy your day. I hung up before she could reply. I lowered the phone and looked at Elena. She understood everything from my expression. He laughed, I said softly. When I asked about the gift, Leo laughed in the background. Elena closed her eyes. She no longer needed proof. We both knew the truth. I walked to the window and looked out at our quiet, respectable suburban street. Manicured lawns, neat houses, playing children. The world I had built for my family. The world my own daughter was trying to turn into hell. What are you going to do? Elena asked. I turned to her. My gaze fell on my study, where my computer sat, holding access to all our finances. Accounts, credit cards, investments. All the resources that for 3 decades had been Chloe's inexhaustible source and safety net. I'm going to teach my daughter a lesson, I said. A lesson about consequences. That evening, as Elena, exhausted by the day's events, retired early, I went into my study and closed the door. The room was filled only with the quiet hum of the computer. I didn't turn on the overhead light, only the desk lamp, which cast a pool of light on my writing desk. On it lay a stack of papers I'd been gathering for the past few years, silent testimony to my paternal folly. Copies of checks for her rent. Printouts of bank transfers marked for emergencies. Receipts from auto repair shops after her latest minor accident. Dozens, if not hundreds, of documented instances of how I had systematically destroyed any sense of responsibility in my daughter. I sat down in my old leather chair, which creaked under my weight, and closed my eyes for a moment. I felt no anger, no resentment. Only a cold, crystalline clarity. I wasn't acting out of revenge. Revenge is an emotion. My actions were the logical conclusion of a process she had initiated. This wasn't revenge, it was sanitation. A surgical removal of a cancerous tumor that threatened to destroy everything I held dear. I opened my laptop and logged into my online banking portal. My fingers moved confidently and swiftly across the keyboard. I knew these passwords and logins by heart. First, the credit card, the same one where I'd seen the purchase at Exotic Pets World. Chloe was listed as an authorized user, a privilege I'd granted her back in college for emergencies. Those emergencies had stretched for 15 years and become a lifestyle. I found the Manage Users section. The system prompted me for answers to security questions: mother's maiden name, first car's make, childhood pet's name. The irony of it all, answers to questions tied to warm family memories now served as the key to destroying the last vestiges of that family. The screen asked, "Are you sure you want to remove authorized user Chloe Morgan?" My cursor hovered over confirm for a second, not out of hesitation, but out of the sheer weight of the moment. This was the Rubicon. A click of the mouse, and I would cross it irrevocably. I clicked. Access for user Chloe Morgan will be revoked within 1 hour. Next was the joint savings account I'd opened for her when she was a child. For years, I'd deposited funds into it, hoping it would be her safety net. It had ultimately become her fund for debt repayment and funding Leo's whims. I transferred the remaining few $1,000s to our main joint account. Then, I navigated to the settings and clicked Close Account. The system informed me the process would take a few business days. Next came the automatic payments. Methodically, one by one, I canceled them all. The monthly transfer to her debit card for spending money, which I, like an idiot, had continued to make. Her car insurance payment, her mobile phone bill, even a subscription to some ridiculous streaming service. Each click of the mouse was like a hammer blow, driving nails into the coffin of her carefree life. I felt no malice, no satisfaction, only a strange, almost surgical calm. I was removing metastases. Finally, I logged into our mobile carrier's website. Our family plan. I found her number and clicked Remove from Plan. The system offered to switch the number to an individual plan, with the owner responsible for payment. I agreed. 30 minutes of methodical work, and it was all done. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the dark laptop screen, reflecting my own tired face. The financial umbilical cord that had connected us for nearly 34 years had been severed. Tomorrow morning, when Chloe tried to pay for her coffee with my card, she would have a surprise. When she discovered her phone was blocked, she'd have another. When she checked her bank account, she would see zero. For the first time in her adult life, she would face reality. The reality that millions of people live by. To spend something, you first have to earn it. I knew what would follow. There would be a call. There would be shouting, accusations, threats, tears. The full spectrum of manipulation that had worked so effectively on me for years. But now I was ready. I had built a wall. An impenetrable wall of canceled accounts and blocked cards. And behind that wall, I was going to start building my new life. A life free from fear, guilt, and the constant anticipation of the next blow. The phone on my desk remained silent, but I knew the quiet wouldn't last long. The next morning dawned with an unfamiliar peace. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and the newspaper, feeling, for the first time in years, no underlying anxiety about an impending phone call with yet another disaster. Elena bustled around the kitchen, making an omelet. She asked no questions about my nocturnal activities in the study, but her slightly brighter demeanor suggested she knew and approved of what I had accomplished. The phone rang precisely at 9:17 a.m. I glanced at the screen. Chloe. I let it ring a couple more times, taking a deep breath and mentally bracing myself for the storm. Then, I pressed the answer button. Good morning, Chloe. Good morning. What kind of good morning is this? Her shriek was so loud and piercing that I had to pull the receiver away from my ear. What did you do, Dad? My card isn't working. I tried to buy coffee, and it was declined. The humiliation in front of the entire coffee shop. My phone is blocked. What is going on? I took a sip of coffee, savoring its bitter taste before replying. My calm seemed to infuriate her even more. Chloe, I know you sent me yesterday's birthday present. A silence fell on the other end for a few heartbeats. Then, her panic morphed into defensive fury. You've lost your mind. Are you trying to get revenge for some stupid prank by leaving me penniless? A prank. She called a box filled with a dozen tarantulas a prank. She hadn't even tried to deny it. Her immediate reaction was a confession. I'm not seeking revenge, I said calmly. I'm simply no longer paying for your irresponsibility. And yes, sending your father a box of venomous spiders is not a prank, Chloe. It's something else entirely. You just don't understand. Her voice rose to a shriek again. I have bills. I need to pay rent. My car payment. I need to eat, for crying out loud. Your rent, which I paid. Your car insurance, which I paid. And the food you bought with my money. I enunciated each word. Perhaps it's time you learned what real financial responsibility looks like, daughter. Oh, really? You want to play hardball? Her tone turned glacial. Fine. Then you can forget about your grandchildren. You will never see them again. Michael and Sophie will grow up never knowing they have a grandfather, or knowing their grandfather is a cold, heartless monster who traded them for his money. That was her final card. The ultimate trump card that had always worked unfailingly. The threat of taking our grandchildren away. But yesterday had changed everything. Chloe, I said quietly but firmly, that threat no longer works. Silence fell again. I could almost feel her trying to process what she'd heard, her brain frantically searching for a new lever of pressure, a new manipulation tactic. But all the old buttons were broken. I can't believe you're doing this to me, she whispered, switching to the victim persona, a tactic I knew all too well. I'm your daughter. I'm struggling. And instead of helping me, you're punishing me. I'm not punishing you. I'm saving myself, I interrupted. Your struggles are the result of your choices. Your choice to live with a parasite dragging you down. Your choice not to work. Your choice to send me that box. Now it's time to face the consequences of your choices. This isn't over, old man, she hissed, discarding the victim mask to reveal her true, ugly face. You think you can control me by cutting off the money? We'll see. She hung up. I slowly placed the phone on the table and looked at Elena. She stood leaning against the kitchen counter, her face a mixture of fear and admiration. She's coming over, she said quietly. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. I nodded. Yes, she's coming. Probably with Leo. They'll want to continue this conversation in person. Are you ready for that? She asked. I considered the question seriously. Was I ready for my enraged daughter and her aggressive partner to show up at my doorstep, demanding money and spewing threats? Was I ready to look her in the eye and not back down? I looked at Elena, at her worried but supportive face. I looked at our home, which I had vowed to protect. Yes, I said. I think I am. Less than an hour later, the roar of an engine and the squeal of brakes outside our driveway heralded the beginning of the next act in this drama. A sharp, demanding ring of the doorbell pierced the house's silence. It was followed by a second, more insistent ring. I didn't hurry. I rose slowly from the table, feeling remarkably calm. The storm I had been anticipating had arrived. I'll go alone, I told Elena. No, she replied firmly, standing beside me. We're in this together. Her resolve gave me strength. I walked to the door and opened it. Chloe and Leo stood on the threshold. She, with a face contorted in fury, red blotches on her neck, and disheveled hair. He, slightly behind her, bulky, scowling, arms crossed like a nightclub bouncer. He radiated overt menace. We need to talk, Chloe blurted out, trying to push past me into the house. I didn't budge, blocking her path. We already talked this morning, I said calmly. I believe I was quite clear. Clear? She laughed hysterically. You were acting insane. You can't just cut me off over some stupid misunderstanding about a Father's Day package. Even now, standing on my doorstep demanding money, she couldn't admit her mistake. There was no misunderstanding, Chloe. You sent me a box of tarantulas. I reacted accordingly. My voice was level and cold. Leo stepped forward, his bulk filling more of the doorway. Listen, old man, he growled. You might not understand. Chloe has expenses. Kids. They need things. Kids whose mother threatens to deny them access to their grandparents if she doesn't get money. I countered evenly, meeting his gaze. I wasn't afraid of him. After the tarantula incident, his physical threat seemed almost primitive. Chloe's face contorted. Fine. You want to play it that way? You'll never see your grandchildren again. Never. Michael and Sophie will grow up knowing their grandfather is a greedy monster who traded them for his money. Those words, which had once pierced my heart like a red-hot knife, now bounced off the armor of my newfound understanding. I looked at my daughter and saw not a victim of circumstance, but a calculating and cruel manipulator. Chloe, I said quietly, and the effect of my words stunned them both. Perhaps that's for the best. Her face registered complete disbelief. This was not the response she had expected. What? She stammered. If you're the kind of person who uses their own children as weapons against their grandparents, then perhaps it's better for them to grow up without that kind of influence. Perhaps it's my last fatherly duty to protect them from your toxicity. Leo's face turned purple. He took another step forward, invading my personal space. You seem to misunderstand who you're dealing with, he hissed in my face. We know where you live. We know your routine. I'd think very carefully before speaking to us like that. Elena gasped behind me, but I remained still. Is that a threat, Leo? I asked calmly. That's a statement of fact, he smirked. Family bonds work both ways. You want to cut us off? Fine. But don't expect us to just disappear quietly. Actually, I said, that's precisely what I expect. And if you choose not to disappear quietly, then this becomes a matter for the police, not a family discussion. Threats, harassment, blackmail. The criminal code has very interesting articles for all of that. Officer Reeves left me his card. At the mention of the police officer's name, Leo faltered slightly. Chloe grabbed his arm, perhaps sensing he was going too far. But it didn't calm her. You'll regret this, she shouted, desperation mixing with venom in her voice. There will be consequences. There already are consequences, Chloe, I said, looking at them both. You're standing on my doorstep because you no longer have my money. Those are the consequences. Welcome to adulthood. They stared at me for a long moment, perhaps finally realizing that no amount of threats, guilt, or manipulation would restore their access to my resources. The man who had been their personal bank for decades had simply declared bankruptcy. Without another word, Chloe spun on her heel and stalked back to the car. Leo shot me one last menacing look and followed her. I watched them drive away, and only when their taillights disappeared around the corner did I close the door. I turned to Elena. Her face was pale, but her eyes held a fire I hadn't seen in years. We'll need a lawyer, I said, and it was the most sensible decision I'd made in 20 years. The next morning, at 9 o'clock, I was already seated in the office of Margaret Lawson, our family lawyer. Margaret was a sharp, tough, and pragmatic woman in her 50s who had handled our affairs for over 15 years. She'd helped us with our wills, property transfers, and Elena's mother's estate. She knew us as a stable, predictable couple. What I was about to tell her would shatter that image entirely. I laid everything out, without omission or embellishment. Chloe's years of financial dependency, the argument over money, the box of tarantulas, the call to the police, my conversation with Chloe, and finally, yesterday's visit and the direct threats from Leo. Margaret listened without interruption, occasionally making notes, her expression growing more serious with each detail. Leo said they know where you live, know your routine, I concluded. It felt like a direct threat. She put down her pen and leaned back. Adam, this has gone far beyond a family disagreement. What you're describing is harassment and intimidation. We need to address this on multiple fronts. That's what I was hoping you'd say. Margaret pulled out a fresh legal pad. Let's start with your will. You mentioned wanting to restructure your inheritance. I want my money to go to my grandchildren's education, not my daughter's casinos, I said. That's a wise decision, Adam. Her voice carried professional warmth. We can establish an educational trust fund that provides for Michael and Sophie's schooling, college expenses, and legitimate educational needs, while preventing any access by their parents. She outlined the framework. An independent trustee would manage the funds, releasing money only for documented educational expenses. Chloe and Leo would have no access, no control, no ability to manipulate the children's inheritance. What about Elena? I asked. She's fully protected, of course. The house, your retirement accounts, her security. Nothing changes there. This only affects what would have gone to Chloe. Next came the restraining order paperwork. Margaret opened a new file and began systematically documenting yesterday's confrontation, the threatening language, the escalating pattern that had culminated in actual intimidation. The tarantula incident is particularly concerning, she said, writing quickly. Using live animals to frighten elderly parents shows planning and malice that courts take very seriously. How long does this process take? The will modifications can be finalized within the week. The restraining order can be filed today. Once it's granted, any contact from Chloe or Leo becomes a legal matter rather than a family dispute. I felt something release in my chest, a tension I'd been carrying for months. The weight of being perpetually available for Chloe's crises, of walking on eggshells to avoid triggering her threats, of enabling destructive behavior. It was all ending. There's one more thing, Margaret said. Based on what you've described, I recommend documenting everything for potential future legal action. Keep records of any attempts to contact you, any violations, any attempts to involve the grandchildren. You think it will get worse before it gets better? People who use manipulation and threats don't usually accept boundaries gracefully. When Chloe discovers she's been cut out of your will and served with a restraining order, her reaction may be significant. But that no longer frightened me. With legal protections in place, her anger would be directed at a system designed to handle such behavior, not at two elderly parents trying to enjoy their retirement. Margaret's assistant brought in the prepared documents. As I signed my name to each page, I felt the satisfying finality of decisions made and implemented. 30 years of financial enabling was officially ending. Our home would be legally protected from harassment. The restraining order should be approved by end of business today, Margaret said. Court officers will serve both Chloe and Leo by tomorrow morning. After that, any contact with you or Elena becomes a criminal matter. I stood to leave, shaking hands with the woman who had just helped me reclaim control of my own life. Outside her office windows, the city continued its normal rhythm. Adam, Margaret called as I reached her door. You've made the right choices. Your family's safety and security come first. I nodded, tucking the folder under my arm. Tomorrow morning, Chloe would discover that manipulation was no longer an option. Tonight, Elena and I would sleep peacefully, knowing the law was finally on our side. 2 days passed in the most peaceful quiet I had experienced in years. Elena and I fell back into comfortable routines that had been constantly interrupted by Chloe's crises. Having coffee without dreading phone calls, afternoon walks without checking for missed messages, evening dinners without discussing the latest financial emergency. On Thursday afternoon, Margaret called to confirm what I'd been anticipating. Adam, the documents were delivered at 2:15 p.m. today. Both Chloe and Leo have been served with the restraining order, and they've received copies of the will modifications. It's done. I thanked her and hung up,